The deafening sound of the helicopter cut through Manhattan's morning air as Clark Armstrong watched the city through bulletproof glass. At 32, he commanded a $2 billion financial empire. But at that moment, his hands trembled holding his phone. "Mr. Armstrong, we've arrived at the hospital helipad," announced the pilot. Clark jumped out before the helicopter had fully landed. His clothes still had paint splatters. He'd abandoned the grand opening of his new art gallery mid-ceremony when he received the call. He ran through Mount Sinai Hospital corridors as if his life depended on it. "Where's the girl who was hit on Madison Avenue?" he shouted at the receptionist, who froze at the sight of the tall man with disheveled brown hair and intense blue eyes. "Sir, you need to calm down." "I won't calm down." Clark slammed both hands on the counter. A young woman, red hair, about 25 years old. She was going to a date. A nurse approached. "Are you related to the patient?" Clark stopped. How to explain? How to say he'd been waiting for her for 3 hours at a restaurant, furious, thinking he'd been stood up again when she was actually fighting for her life. I am... His voice failed. "He's the fiancé," said a female voice behind him. Clark turned to see a woman around 30, also with dirty clothes but covered in dirt and leaves. She stared at him with determination. "Sorry I'm late," she said, extending her hand with a mischievous smile. "I'm Sophia Martinez, Eloise's best friend, and you must be the man she won't shut up about for 6 months, though she forgot to mention you travel by helicopter. That's subtle." Clark stared at her confused. "How do you—" "Eloise called me from the ground, Mr. Armstrong, before passing out. Said she needed to warn the ice prince that she wouldn't make it to the date." Sophia smiled sadly, then added with dark humor, "I spent 2 hours trapped in a broken elevator trying to get here. Apparently today is Miss Important Appointments Day." Clark's world crumbled. For 6 months, since meeting Eloise Thompson at a small cafe where she worked, he'd built walls around his heart. A wealthy heiress who had betrayed him years ago left him with deep scars. But Eloise, she was different. Simple, funny, genuine. And he had doubted her. "How is she?" His voice came out as a whisper. "Stable, but—" Sophia hesitated, then looked directly at him. She hit her head pretty hard. "The doctors don't know when she'll wake up. But hey, at least you'll have time to practice your apology speech. Might I suggest starting with, 'I'm sorry I'm a paranoid billionaire'?" Clark closed his eyes. 3 hours earlier, he was at Le Bernardin, New York's most expensive restaurant, checking his watch every 5 minutes. Each passing minute confirmed his worst suspicions. Another woman interested only in his money had given up when she realized he wasn't just a pretty face with an unlimited credit card. But Eloise didn't even know who he really was. "Can I see her?" he asked. Sophia studied his face for a moment. "She said you were rich, but didn't mention you were, helicopter rich." She gestured toward the aircraft visible through the window. "What's next? Do you have a private island too?" Clark laughed bitterly. "2, actually." "Of course you do." Sophia shook her head but smiled. "Well, Mr. Mysterious Billionaire, I hope you're prepared for a long journey. Because when Eloise wakes up, you'll have a lot of explaining to do. And so will she." "What do you mean?" Clark asked as they walked down the corridors. "Let's just say—" Sophia paused dramatically. "Eloise isn't exactly who you think she is either. But first, let's focus on making sure she wakes up to tell you herself." As they walked toward her room, Clark had no idea he was about to experience the biggest plot twist of his life, and that the woman sleeping in that hospital bed held secrets that would make his own fortune irrelevant. The room door opened, revealing Eloise connected to machines, but still beautiful like a wounded angel. Clark approached the bed, and for the first time in years, a tear rolled down his face. "Eloise," he whispered, taking her hand gently, "forgive me for doubting you." He didn't know she could hear him, and that on the other side of the door, Sophia was making a call that would change everything. "Hello, Mrs. Thompson. It's about Eloise. You need to come to New York. Now. And bring the papers. Yes, the inheritance papers. I think we've finally found the heir. She hung up and looked back at Clark, who was now sitting beside Eloise's bed holding her hand like it was the most precious thing in the world. Poor guy, Sophia muttered to herself with a smirk. He has no idea he just fell in love with the secret heiress to the Thompson steel fortune. This is going to be good. 3 days later, Eloise Thompson's eyelids fluttered open to the sterile white ceiling of Mount Sinai Hospital. The first thing she noticed wasn't the throbbing in her head or the IV in her arm. It was the incredibly handsome man asleep in the chair beside her bed, his expensive suit wrinkled, his usually perfect hair disheveled. "Clark?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. He jolted awake instantly, his blue eyes immediately focusing on her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "Eloise, thank God you're awake. How do you feel?" "Like I got hit by a..." She paused, memory flooding back. "Oh right, I actually did get hit by a truck." She tried to sit up and winced. "How long have you been here?" 3 days, he said without hesitation, then caught himself. "I mean, I've been checking on you. Regularly. Very regularly." Sophia's voice came from the doorway. "He hasn't left that chair except for bathroom breaks and when the nurses physically dragged him out for shower privileges." She entered with a coffee and a smirk. "It's been quite the romantic vigil. Very notebook of you, Clark." Eloise looked between them, confused. "You two have met?" "Oh, we're practically best friends now," Sophia said, plopping into another chair. "Did you know your mystery man owns half of Manhattan? And apparently most of the art galleries, too." "What?" Eloise's eyes widened as she looked at Clark. "I thought you said you worked in finance." Clark ran his hand through his hair nervously. "I do work in finance, I just didn't mention the scale." "The scale?" Eloise laughed, then winced as it hurt her head. "Clark, what exactly do you do?" "I'm the CEO of Armstrong Financial Holdings," he said quietly. "We manage about $2 billion in assets." The room fell silent except for the beeping of medical equipment. $2 billion, Eloise repeated slowly. "With a B?" "Yes." "And you've been coming to my little coffee shop for 6 months ordering a simple black coffee and a blueberry muffin, letting me think you were just some guy who worked downtown." "Yes," Sophia whispered loudly. "This is better than any soap opera." Eloise stared at Clark for a long moment. "So when you asked me out to dinner at Le Bernardin, you weren't trying to impress me with your one fancy meal savings. You could probably buy the restaurant." "I could," Clark admitted. "And I almost did when they said they couldn't squeeze us in for a reservation." "You almost bought a restaurant for our date?" "I didn't actually buy it," he said defensively. "I just made a very generous donation to the chef's favorite charity." Eloise blinked slowly. "How generous?" $50,000. $50,000? Eloise tried to sit up quickly and immediately regretted it. "For a dinner reservation?" Sophia was now eating imaginary popcorn. "Please continue." "This is fascinating." Clark moved closer to Eloise's bed. "Look, I know this is a lot to process, but I need you to understand something. The money, the business, that's not who I am. At least, it's not who I want to be with you." "Then who are you with me?" Eloise asked softly. Clark took her hand gently. "I'm the guy who looks forward to your terrible coffee every morning because it means I get to see you smile. I'm the guy who memorized your schedule so I'd never miss you. I'm the guy who's been terrified for 3 days that I'd never get to tell you how I really feel." "And how do you really feel?" "I'm falling in love with you, Eloise Thompson, and I'm scared to death because the last woman I trusted with my heart saw dollar signs instead of me." Eloise felt tears forming in her eyes. "Clark, I know it's crazy. I know we've only been on 3 actual dates, and I know finding out about the money changes everything, but..." "Clark, stop," Eloise interrupted. "I need to tell you something too." Sophia suddenly stood up. "Oh, look at the time, I should go check on hospital things. Very important hospital things." She practically sprinted toward the door, then turned back. "Eloise, remember what we talked about? Truth time." After Sophia left, Clark looked puzzled. What did she mean? Eloise took a deep breath. Remember when you said the last woman you trusted saw dollar signs instead of you? Yes. Well, the last man I trusted saw dollar signs instead of me too. Clark frowned. What do you mean, you work at a coffee shop? I work at a coffee shop because I wanted to know what it felt like to be normal, to have people like me for me, not for... She hesitated. Not for what, Eloise? My trust fund. Clark's expression changed. Your what? My grandfather built Thompson Steel. When he died, he left everything to be divided among his grandchildren when we turned 25. I inherited $47 million 6 months ago. The machines in the room seemed to beep louder in the silence that followed. You're a millionaire? Clark asked slowly. Multi-millionaire, technically, which is why I've been working at the coffee shop under my mother's maiden name. I wanted to find someone who would love me without knowing about the money. She looked at him sadly. Ironic, isn't it? We were both hiding the same thing. Clark started laughing. First a chuckle, then full-blown laughter. Are you having a breakdown? Eloise asked, concerned. No, I'm just... He wiped tears from his eyes. We're both rich people pretending to be normal people, lying to each other about money while falling in love over terrible coffee and day-old pastries. Eloise started giggling too. When you put it like that, we sound pretty ridiculous. Completely ridiculous, Clark agreed, then grew serious. But it doesn't change how I feel about you. It doesn't change how I feel about you either, Eloise said softly. Clark leaned closer. And how do you feel about me? Like I'm falling in love with a man who spent $50,000 just to have dinner with me, and I'm pretty sure that should terrify me. But instead I find it ridiculously romantic. Good, Clark said, moving even closer, because I was planning to do much more ridiculous things to win your heart. Such as? Well, I may have bought the hospital's entire flower shop inventory. Your room is about to look like a botanical garden exploded. Right on cue, a parade of delivery men began entering with enormous flower arrangements. Eloise watched in amazement as her small hospital room transformed into a floral paradise. Clark, this is insane. Too much? He asked, suddenly worried. Completely over the top, she confirmed. Should I cancel the mariachi band? The what? Kidding, Clark said quickly. Though I did consider it. Eloise pulled him closer by his tie. Clark Armstrong, you beautiful, ridiculous, wealthy man. Kiss me before you do something else crazy. Yes, ma'am, he whispered and leaned in to kiss her softly. Just as their lips met, Sophia burst back through the door. Oh, sorry. Don't mind me, just grabbing my... Oh wow, Clark, the flowers are gorgeous. Very subtle. I'm sure no one will notice. She grabbed her purse and headed back out. Carry on with the swooning. Clark and Eloise broke apart, laughing. I like her, Clark said. She grows on you, Eloise agreed, like a very sarcastic fungus. So, Clark said, taking her hand again, what happens now? Two rich people who've been pretending to be normal people. Where do we go from here? Well, Eloise said with a mischievous smile, I'm thinking we start over. No lies, no pretending. Just us. Just us, Clark agreed. Fair warning, though, the real me comes with a lot of complications. The real me does too. Such as? Well, for starters, I may have told my family I was dating someone, and they're flying in from Chicago tomorrow to meet you. Clark's face went pale. Tomorrow? Don't worry, Eloise said sweetly. I may have also mentioned you were just a regular guy who works in finance. So you'll need to dial down the billionaire thing by about 90%. 90%? Maybe 95%. My dad is very protective of his little girl. Clark looked around at the flower explosion he'd created. I'm doomed, aren't I? Completely, Eloise confirmed cheerfully. But I'll help you practice being normal. It'll be fun. As Clark contemplated the impossibility of appearing normal while being himself, he realized he'd never been happier to face an impossible challenge. Because for the first time in years he was facing it with someone who might just be worth it. Outside in the hallway, Sophia was on the phone again. Mrs. Thompson, yes, they're both awake now. And yes, they're both insane. You're going to love this. Clark Clark Armstrong stood in front of his walk-in closet the next morning, staring at rows of designer suits with the panic of a man facing execution. Eloise had been discharged that morning with strict instructions to rest, and her parents were arriving in 3 hours. Okay, he muttered to himself. How does a normal person dress? He pulled out a casual button-down shirt. The price tag was still on it, $500. He quickly ripped it off and threw it in the trash, then realized that normal people probably don't throw away $500 like garbage. His phone buzzed with a text from Eloise. Remember, you're just a regular finance guy. Think middle management. Maybe drive something normal too? Clark looked out his penthouse window at his garage below, where his Lamborghini, Aston Martin, and Tesla Roadster gleamed in the morning sun. He sighed and called his assistant. James, I need you to rent me the most ordinary car you can find. Sir, did you say ordinary? The most boring, middle-class, normal car in existence. Might I ask why? I'm pretending to be poor. There was a long pause. Sir, are you having a breakdown? Should I call Dr. Patterson? No breakdown, just find me a Honda Civic or something. 2 hours later, Clark stood in Eloise's modest Brooklyn apartment, wearing khakis he'd bought at Target, after Googling where normal people shop, and a polo shirt that cost less than his usual tip at restaurants. He felt like he was in costume. You look, Eloise paused, trying not to laugh, very normal. I feel ridiculous, Clark admitted. These pants cost $30 total, for the whole pair. That's actually expensive for Target, Eloise said, then saw his horrified expression. Kidding. You look great. Very approachable. The doorbell rang, and Eloise's face lit up. They're here. She squeezed Clark's hand. Remember, you work in middle management at a small financial firm. You live in Queens. You take the subway. The subway, Clark repeated, like he was memorizing a foreign language. Eloise opened the door to reveal a warm-looking couple in their 50s. Her father was tall and broad-shouldered with graying hair, wearing a Chicago Cubs jacket. Her mother was petite like Eloise, with the same red hair and bright smile. Mom! Dad! Eloise hugged them both. Sweetheart, you look pale, her mother fussed. Are you eating enough? And this apartment is so small. Are you sure you can't let us help? Mom, Eloise interrupted. I want you to meet Clark. Clark, these are my parents, Robert and Linda Thompson. Clark stepped forward with his most humble smile. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, it's wonderful to meet you. Eloise talks about you constantly. Robert sized him up with the suspicious gaze of every father meeting his daughter's boyfriend. So you're the finance guy? Yes, sir. I work at, Clark's mind went blank. He hadn't actually prepared a fake company name. Peterson and Associates. Eloise jumped in smoothly. It's a small firm in Midtown. Never heard of it, Robert said. Very small, Clark agreed quickly. We mostly handle middle-sized accounts for middle-class families. Linda smiled warmly. That sounds lovely, dear. It must be nice to help regular people with their money. Oh yes, Clark said, relaxing slightly. I'm very passionate about helping regular people with their regular money problems. Sophia, who had been listening from the kitchen, nearly choked on her coffee. Would you like something to drink? Eloise offered. We have coffee, water, or... Actually, Robert said, I was hoping Clark might want to join me for a beer and watch the Cubs game. Get to know each other man to man. Clark's face brightened. I'd love that, sir. I'm a huge baseball fan. Great. What's your team? The Yankees, Clark said without thinking. Robert's expression immediately darkened. Yankees? Clark sensed danger but couldn't figure out why. Is that bad? Dad's from Chicago, Eloise said quietly. Cubs fan. They have a historical rivalry with the Yankees. Oh, Clark said, then tried to recover. But I also love the Cubs. Great team. Very cubby. Robert stared at him. Cubby? He means they're underdogs, Eloise translated desperately. Clark loves underdogs. As they settled on the couch with beers, Robert continued his interrogation. So Clark, what do you drive? Clark froze. Honda Civic. What year? Clark panicked. Good year? 2015? 2020? New? Used? Used, Clark said quickly. Very used. So used it's practically falling apart. I keep it together with, tape. Duct tape? The regular kind of tape. Robert was looking at him like he'd grown a second head. Regular tape won't hold a car together, son. Right. I meant duct tape, obviously. I'm not crazy. Clark took a large gulp of beer. Linda returned from the kitchen with Eloise. Clark, dear, what a lovely watch. Is that a Rolex? Clark looked down at his wrist in horror. He'd completely forgotten to switch watches. This? No. This is a Folex. A Folex? Linda repeated. It's a Chinese knockoff. Very fake. Cost me $12. Robert leaned over to look. That's definitely a real Rolex, son. I sold watches for 15 years. The room fell silent except for the baseball game on TV. Okay, Clark said finally. I can explain. Please do, Robert said, crossing his arms. Clark looked at Eloise, who nodded encouragingly. The truth is, I'm not exactly middle management. What exactly are you? Robert asked. I'm successful. More successful than I initially mentioned. How successful? Linda asked gently. Very successful. Clark, Eloise said softly. Just tell them. Clark took a deep breath. I own Armstrong Financial Holdings. We manage about $2 billion in assets. I live in a penthouse in Manhattan. I drove here in a rented Honda Civic because my usual cars are more expensive than this apartment. Robert stared at him for a long moment. You're rich. Very rich, Clark confirmed. And you lied to us. I asked him to, Eloise interjected quickly. I thought you'd react badly to the money. Honey, Linda said gently, we don't care if he's rich or poor. We care that he lied. And that he's a Yankees fan, Robert added grimly. Clark stood up suddenly. Mr. Thompson, you're absolutely right. I lied and that was wrong. But I need you to know why. He looked directly at Robert. 5 years ago, I was engaged to a woman who told me she loved me. On our wedding day, I overheard her on the phone telling her sister that she could put up with anyone for $2 billion. She never loved me. She loved my bank account. The room was quiet as Clark continued. When I met your daughter, she was the first person in years who looked at me and saw just me. Not my money, not my status, just Clark. And I've never felt anything like that before. He turned to Eloise. I know I screwed up. I know lying was wrong. But I was terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd see dollar signs instead of me. And now you know I was hiding money too, Eloise said softly. Yes, and it's the most beautiful irony of my life, Clark said with a small smile. We were both so scared of being loved for our money that we almost missed loving each other for who we really are. Robert looked at his wife, then back at Clark. So who are you really, son? Without the money. Clark sat back down, his shoulders relaxing. I'm a guy who works too much because he's afraid to trust people. I collect vintage comic books. I can't cook anything except scrambled eggs, and even those are questionable. I watch rom-coms when I'm sad, though I'll deny it if you tell anyone, and I'm completely, terrifyingly in love with your daughter. Linda smiled. Now that sounds honest. Robert nodded slowly. And the Yankees thing? I'm actually not much of a baseball fan, Clark admitted. I just said Yankees because it's the only team I could think of. Well, Robert said, cracking a smile, at least you're honest about that too. Suddenly there was a commotion outside. Through the window they could see a crowd gathering around something in the street. What's going on? Eloise asked. Clark looked out and went pale. Oh no. What? I may have forgotten to tell my assistant to cancel something. As they watched, a red Ferrari pulled up, followed by a truck carrying what appeared to be a full mariachi band. Clark, Eloise said slowly, please tell me that's not for me. I can honestly say I told him not to send the mariachi band, Clark said weakly. What about the Ferrari? That may be my backup car, in case the Honda Civic didn't work out. The mariachi band was now setting up in the street, drawing curious neighbors from their apartments. Robert looked at Clark, then at the scene outside, then back at Clark. Son, you're either completely crazy or the most romantic man alive. Can I be both? Clark asked hopefully. As the mariachi band launched into a Spanish love song, Robert started laughing. You know what? I like you, Clark Armstrong. You're ridiculous, but you're honest about being ridiculous. Is that good? Clark asked. That's very good, Linda said, patting his arm. Anyone willing to hire a mariachi band for our daughter gets points in my book. Eloise looked out at the spectacle, then at Clark's nervous face, then started laughing. You beautiful, crazy man. I can't believe you did this. I told you I was going to do ridiculous things to win your heart, Clark said sheepishly. Well, Eloise said, standing up and pulling him toward the door. We can't let a perfectly good mariachi band go to waste. Come on, everyone, let's go dance in the street. As they headed outside to join the impromptu street party, Robert put his arm around Clark's shoulders. Just so we're clear, son, you break my daughter's heart, and I don't care how much money you have, I'll hunt you down. Understood, sir, Clark said seriously. Good. Now let's go see if you can dance better than you can lie. As they joined the mariachi-fueled street party, with half of Brooklyn coming out to watch, Clark realized that sometimes the most ridiculous gestures led to the most perfect moments. And judging by the way Eloise was laughing as he spun her around to Spanish guitar music, he was finally starting to get something right. Sophia appeared beside them with a margarita that had materialized from nowhere. This is the best day ever, she announced. I'm putting this on Instagram. Please don't, Clark and Eloise said in unison. Too late. Sophia grinned, holding up her phone. And Clark, next time maybe start with the mariachi band. It's a real icebreaker. As the music played and the neighbors cheered, Clark held Eloise close and realized that being ridiculously, honestly himself might just be the key to everything he'd ever wanted. 2 weeks after the mariachi incident, which had become neighborhood legend, Clark was in his office on the 47th floor of the Armstrong building, staring at a contract that made his stomach turn. Across from him sat his business partner and best friend since college, Marcus Webb, along with their team of lawyers. It's a done deal, Clark, Marcus said, sliding the papers across the mahogany desk. Thompson Steel wants to merge with our infrastructure division. This could be the biggest acquisition in the company's history. Clark's head snapped up. Thompson Steel? You know them? Asked Jennifer, their lead attorney. I might know someone connected to them. Clark's mind raced. Eloise had mentioned her grandfather built Thompson Steel, but she'd inherited money from a trust fund. He'd assumed the company had been sold years ago. The CEO, William Thompson, specifically requested this meeting, Marcus continued. Apparently, he's heard about our expansion into green energy infrastructure. He wants to partner with us to modernize their entire operation. Clark felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. William Thompson. Is he related to Robert Thompson from Chicago? Marcus checked his notes. Yes, actually. Robert is his younger brother. Family business. Why? Before Clark could answer, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Armstrong? Mr. William Thompson is here for your 2 p.m. meeting. Clark looked at the clock. 1:58 p.m. Send him in. The door opened to reveal a tall, imposing man in his 60s who looked exactly like an older, more serious version of Robert Thompson. Clark's heart sank as recognition flashed in William's eyes. Mr. Armstrong, William said coolly, I believe you know my niece. The room suddenly felt very small. Uncle Bill, came a familiar voice from the hallway. Eloise appeared in the doorway, wearing a professional Navy suit that Clark had never seen before. I'm sorry I'm late. I got caught in traffic from the... She stopped mid-sentence when she saw Clark. Eloise? Clark stood up slowly. What are you doing here? I work here, she said, looking equally confused. Uncle Bill asked me to sit in on this meeting. What are you doing here? I own here, Clark said weakly. Marcus looked between them. I'm sorry, do you two know each other? They're dating, William said dryly. Though apparently neither mentioned their day jobs. Eloise stared at Clark. You own Armstrong Financial Holdings. You work for Thompson Steel, Clark replied. I'm the Vice President of Operations, Eloise said faintly. You're the VP of Operations? Clark's voice cracked. I thought you worked at a coffee shop. I do work at a coffee shop on weekends for fun. Eloise sat down heavily in a chair. I thought you were in middle management. This is fascinating, Marcus murmured to Jennifer. Should we leave them alone? Absolutely not, William said firmly. We have business to discuss. He turned to Clark. Mr. Armstrong, I came here to propose a merger between Thompson Steel and your infrastructure division. However, given this complication, perhaps we should reconsider. What complication? Clark asked, though he dreaded the answer. You're dating my niece under false pretenses, William said bluntly. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence in a business partnership. False pretenses? Eloise stood up. Uncle Bill, we're both adults who happen to. Eloise, you told your parents he was a middle manager, William interrupted. And you, Mr. Armstrong, presumably didn't know she was one of the heirs to Thompson Steel's controlling interest. Clark's world tilted. Controlling interest? Eloise looked uncomfortable. I may have downplayed my role in the family business. How much controlling interest? Clark asked quietly. 30%, William answered when Eloise hesitated. She's being groomed to take over when I retire. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus cleared his throat. So, should we reschedule? No, Clark said firmly. Business is business. Personal relationships are separate. Are they? William challenged. Because if you two break up, any business partnership becomes complicated. And if you stay together, there could be conflicts of interest, insider trading concerns, shareholder disputes. Uncle Bill, Eloise said sharply, you're being ridiculous. Am I? Eloise, you've been working part-time at a coffee shop while earning an MBA, telling everyone you want to experience normal life before taking on family responsibilities. Now you're dating one of the most powerful men in New York's financial sector. How does that look? Clark felt anger rising. Mr. Thompson, I understand your concerns, but do you? William stood up. Mr. Armstrong, my niece is worth $47 million personally, plus her stake in a company worth $800 million. She's also brilliant, kind, and naive about fortune hunters. Uncle Bill, Eloise gasped. I am not a fortune hunter, Clark said, his voice dangerously quiet. Aren't you? A billionaire who hides his identity to date a coffee shop girl who happens to be an heiress? Quite a coincidence. Clark stood up, his hands clenched. You think I'm using her for money? I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Then why lie about who you are? Because the last woman I trusted wanted me for my money. Because every relationship I've had since I became successful has been about what I could provide, not who I am. Because for the first time in years, someone looked at me and saw just me. And you, Eloise. William turned to his niece. Working at a coffee shop, hiding your education and business acumen. Why? Eloise's cheeks flushed. Because I wanted to know what it felt like to be chosen for myself, not for my family name or inheritance. William looked between them. So, you're both lying about who you are to find authentic love. Yes, Clark and Eloise said simultaneously. And you found each other. Yes. And neither of you knew the other was also lying. Correct. William sat back down. This is either the most romantic thing I've ever heard, or the most elaborate corporate espionage scheme in business history. Marcus raised his hand tentatively. Could it be both? Jennifer elbowed him. Not helping. William studied Clark carefully. Mr. Armstrong, what are your intentions regarding my niece? My intentions? Do you love her? Clark looked at Eloise, whose face was red with embarrassment. Mr. Thompson, with respect, that's between Eloise and me. Actually, Eloise said quietly, I'd like to know too. The room fell silent. Clark realized that everything, the business deal, his relationship, his entire future, hung on this moment. I love her more than I've ever loved anyone, he said simply. I love that she makes terrible coffee but takes pride in it anyway. I love that she argues with customers about their music choices. I love that she's brilliant in business but pretends to struggle with the cash register. I love that she's beautiful and doesn't know it, powerful and doesn't flaunt it, and rich but still tips street musicians. Eloise's eyes filled with tears. I love her enough to give up this deal if it means protecting what we have, Clark continued. And I love her enough to walk away if my presence in her life makes things complicated. Clark, Eloise whispered. But most of all, Clark said, looking directly at her, I love her enough to stop lying. About who I am, what I want, and how much she means to me. William watched this exchange with the expression of a man solving a complex puzzle. And you, Eloise? How do you feel about Mr. Armstrong? Eloise wiped her eyes. I love him too. I love that he tips the barista $20 for a $5 coffee. I love that he reads the newspaper carefully but pretends to skim it. I love that he wears expensive suits but doesn't know how to work a laundromat. I love that he's powerful but gentle, rich but generous, and successful but still insecure about whether people like him. She stood up and walked to Clark. And I love him enough to tell you right now, Uncle Bill, that if you try to use this business deal to control my personal life, I'll vote against the merger myself. William raised an eyebrow. That's a significant threat, given your voting shares. It's not a threat. It's a promise. Clark took Eloise's hand. Mr. Thompson, I withdraw from this deal. My company will pass on the merger. Clark, no, Eloise protested. Yes, Clark said firmly. I won't be the reason your family questions your judgment or your relationship with them becomes complicated. But this deal could be worth hundreds of millions to both companies. And you're worth more than that to me. William watched this back and forth with growing amusement. Are you two finished making dramatic sacrifices for each other? They turned to him, surprised. Because if you are, I'd like to propose a solution. William pulled out a different set of papers. Mr. Armstrong, your company handles investments and acquisitions. My company builds things. Eloise's specialty is operations and modernization. Rather than a merger, what if we structure this as a three-way partnership? Three-way? Marcus asked. Armstrong Financial handles the financing and investment structure. Thompson Steel provides the manufacturing and materials. And Eloise starts her own consulting firm to handle the operations and modernization for both companies. Clark and Eloise looked at each other. She'd be independent? Clark asked. Completely. Her own company, her own clients, her own decisions. No conflicts of interest because she's not employed by either of your companies. Eloise's eyes lit up. My own firm? You've been talking about it for years, William said gently. Your MBA thesis was on modernizing legacy industrial companies. This could be your chance to put those ideas into practice. But Uncle Bill, I'm supposed to take over Thompson Steel someday. Says who? Your brother Michael has been practically running the day-to-day operations for 3 years. He loves it, and he's good at it. You love strategy and innovation. Why not do what you love? Clark squeezed Eloise's hand. It sounds perfect. Does it? Eloise asked, then turned to William. What's the catch? William smiled. The catch is that you two have to stop lying to each other. No more secrets, no more pretending to be something you're not. If you're going to work together in any capacity, I need to know you can be honest. We can be honest, Clark said. Prove it, William challenged. Right here, right now. One secret each that you haven't told the other. Clark and Eloise looked at each other nervously. I'll go first, Clark said. I bought the coffee shop. What? Eloise stared at him. Last week. I was worried about you going back to work so soon after the accident, and I thought if I owned it, I could make sure you had the best health insurance and flexible hours, and you bought my workplace without telling me? I was going to tell you. I just wanted to make sure it was set up right first. Eloise took a deep breath. Okay. My turn. I've been secretly auditing your company for the past month. You've been what? Uncle Bill asked me to do a preliminary assessment of Armstrong Financial as a potential partner. I didn't know you were Clark Armstrong until today. So you've been investigating me? And you've been buying my job. They stared at each other for a moment, then burst out laughing. We're both control freaks, Eloise said. Completely, Clark agreed. This is either going to work perfectly or be a complete disaster, Marcus observed. Probably both, Jennifer added. William stood up and extended his hand to Clark. Mr. Armstrong, do we have a deal? All three of us? Clark looked at Eloise, who nodded enthusiastically. We have a deal, Clark said, shaking William's hand. As the lawyers began discussing details, Eloise pulled Clark aside. So, she said quietly, we're going to be business partners. Is that going to be weird? Clark asked. Probably, but the good kind of weird. There's a good kind of weird? The kind where I get to see you in action, running meetings and making decisions and being brilliant at what you do. Clark smiled. And I get to see you start your own company and change entire industries. Think we can keep business and personal separate? Clark considered this seriously. Absolutely not. We're going to argue about everything, second-guess each other's decisions, and probably drive everyone around us crazy. Sounds perfect, Eloise said, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. Just one question, Clark said as they broke apart. As your business partner, do I get a discount on coffee? Absolutely not. In fact, I'm raising your prices. Consider it a consulting fee. As they rejoined the meeting, both of them realized that finding love was complicated enough. Adding business partnerships, family dynamics, and merger negotiations only made it more complex. But as Eloise squeezed his hand under the conference table and Clark squeezed back, they both thought that maybe complicated was exactly what they needed. After all, anything worth having was worth fighting for, even if the fighting was happening in a boardroom with lawyers taking notes. 3 months later, Eloise Thompson Rodriguez sat in her brand new office overlooking Central Park, staring at her laptop screen in horror. The headline from Business Weekly glared back at her. Coffee Shop Cinderella: How Eloise Thompson Used Romance to Secure Million-Dollar Deals. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Have you seen the article? It's not good. Call me. Before Eloise could respond, her assistant knocked on the door. Ms. Thompson, Mr. Armstrong is here to see you. Clark walked in, his face grim, carrying the same magazine. We need to talk. You've seen it, Eloise said, not a question. The whole city's seen it. Clark sat down across from her desk. According to this, you're a mastermind who seduced me to get inside information for the Thompson-Armstrong partnership. Eloise read aloud from the article. Sources close to the situation suggest that Ms. Thompson deliberately targeted Mr. Armstrong, using her coffee shop job as cover to get close to one of New York's most eligible bachelors. The subsequent business deal, worth an estimated $300 million, raises serious questions about corporate ethics and potential insider trading. Who would say something like this? Clark asked. Eloise's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and her face went pale. It's the SEC. The Securities and Exchange Commission? They want to schedule an interview. Eloise answered the call, spoke briefly, then hung up. Tomorrow at 9 a.m. they're investigating possible securities violations. Clark ran his hands through his hair. This is insane. We both know how we actually met. Do we? Eloise asked quietly. Clark looked up sharply. What do you mean? I mean, think about it from the outside. Rich heiress working at a coffee shop near your office building. You come in every day at exactly the same time. I always remember your order. We start talking about business and... Eloise, you're not seriously suggesting... I'm not suggesting anything. I'm saying that's how it looks. She stood up and walked to the window. And there's something else. What? I may have known who you were before we officially met. The room went dead silent. What did you just say? Clark's voice was dangerously quiet. Eloise turned around, tears in her eyes. A week before you first came into the coffee shop, Uncle Bill mentioned he was researching Armstrong Financial as a potential partner. He showed me your picture from Forbes magazine. Clark stood up slowly. So when I walked into that coffee shop, I recognized you immediately. And you didn't think to mention this? I was going to. But then we started talking, and you were so different from what I expected. And I thought maybe you could kill two birds with one stone? Clark's voice was ice cold. Get to know the competition and find a boyfriend at the same time? That's not what happened. Isn't it? You knew exactly who I was. You were already investigating my company, and you just happened to be working at a coffee shop in my neighborhood. Clark, I worked at that coffee shop for 6 months before I knew anything about you. Can you prove that? Eloise stared at him. You want me to prove when I started working at a coffee shop? Right now, I want you to prove a lot of things. The hurt in Eloise's eyes was immediate and deep. You think I'm lying about everything. I think, Clark said carefully, that I'm learning there's a lot you haven't told me. Eloise's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at it and her face crumpled. Oh no. What now? It's from my parents. They just landed at JFK. They're flying in because they saw the article and think I need crisis management. Before Clark could respond, there was a commotion outside Eloise's office. Through the glass walls, they could see a crowd of reporters in the lobby. How did they get up here? Eloise asked. Her assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Thompson, building security says there are news vans outside and reporters in the lobby asking about you and Mr. Armstrong. Clark looked out the window. There are photographers across the street. This is a nightmare. Eloise sank into her chair. Clark's phone rang. Marcus, he answered. What? Slow down. What do you mean the board called an emergency meeting? Today? Why would they? His face darkened. I see. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and looked at Eloise. My board of directors wants to discuss recent publicity concerns and how they might affect the company's reputation. Clark, I'm so sorry, are you? Because right now I honestly don't know what to believe. The words hit Eloise like a physical blow. You think I planned all of this? I think, Clark said, grabbing his coat, that the woman I fell in love with might not actually exist. He headed for the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, Eloise, if this was all some elaborate scheme, congratulations, it worked perfectly. After he left, Eloise sat alone in her office watching the reporters gather outside. Her phone kept buzzing with calls from journalists, lawyers, and business associates. But the only call she wanted was from the one person who would never call her again. Sophia burst through the door 20 minutes later. Okay, I've talked to my contact at Business Weekly. The article was based on an anonymous tip from someone who claimed to have inside knowledge of your relationship. Someone with inside knowledge who would... Eloise's eyes widened. Oh my God. What? Victoria Ashford. Who's Victoria Ashford? Clark's ex-fiancée, the one who left him at the altar for his money. She called me last week. Sophia stared at her. She called you? When were you planning to mention this? I didn't think it was important. She said she wanted to make amends and asked if we could meet for coffee. I told her I wasn't interested. Eloise, please tell me you didn't give her any information about your relationship. Of course not, but... Eloise's face went pale. She asked how we met. I said we met at the coffee shop where I work. She seemed surprised that I had a job. Oh, honey. She must have put the pieces together. Coffee shop, Thompson Steel, the business partnership. Eloise grabbed her phone. I have to call Clark. Eloise, maybe you should... He thinks I'm lying about everything, Sophia. He thinks I manipulated him from the beginning. But you didn't. I know that and you know that, but how do I prove it? How do I prove that falling in love with him was real when everything else looks so calculated? Before Sophia could answer, Eloise's parents appeared in the doorway looking like they'd come to stage an intervention. Eloise Marie Thompson, her mother said, using her full name like she was 12 years old. We need to talk. Not now, Mom. Yes, now, her father said firmly. We just spent 3 hours on a plane reading about our daughter's alleged corporate espionage scheme. It's not a scheme. Then what is it? Her mother asked, sitting down uninvited. Because from where we're sitting, it looks like you used that poor man's feelings to advance your career. Poor man? Eloise stared at her parents. He's a billionaire. Money doesn't protect people from heartbreak, sweetheart, her father said gently. I didn't break his heart, I love him. Then why didn't you tell him you knew who he was? Her mother asked. Eloise opened her mouth to answer, then closed it. How could she explain that she'd been terrified of losing the first genuine connection she'd felt in years? How could she make them understand that keeping that secret had felt like protecting something precious? I was scared, she said finally. Of what? Of exactly what's happening right now. Of everyone thinking I was using him. Of him thinking I was using him. Her father's expression softened. Honey, if you love someone, you have to trust them with the truth. All of it. I tried, but every time I started to tell him, something happened. The accident, meeting you guys, the business deal. Eloise, Sophia said gently, you've had dozens of opportunities to tell him. In the hospital, when you were both confessing about being rich, when you met his parents, when Uncle William revealed your job. I know. Eloise stood up, frustrated. I know I should have told him sooner, but I was scared that if he knew I'd recognized him from the beginning, he'd think our entire relationship was built on a lie. Wasn't it? Her mother asked quietly. The question hung in the air like a bomb. No, Eloise said firmly. It wasn't. Everything I felt for him was real. Everything we shared was real. The only lie was not telling him I'd seen his picture before. But that's a big lie, honey, her father said. I know. Eloise's voice broke. And now I've lost him. Her phone rang. She looked at the caller ID hopefully, but it wasn't Clark. It was Uncle William. Eloise? I just heard about the article. Are you all right? No, Uncle Bill, I'm not all right. Clark thinks I manipulated him. The SEC wants to investigate me, and there are reporters outside my building. Where are you now? My office. Stay there, I'm coming over. Uncle Bill, I don't think... Eloise, listen to me. Your grandfather built Thompson Steel with integrity. Your father raised you with strong values, and I've watched you work for the past 3 months with nothing but honesty and dedication. I don't care what some article says, I know who you are. After he hung up, Eloise looked at her parents and Sophia. What if Clark never forgives me? Then, her mother said, taking her hand, you fight for him. Because if you love him as much as you say you do, you don't give up. How do I fight for someone who doesn't trust me? You prove that you're trustworthy, her father said. You find out who's behind this article, you clear your name, and you show him that your love is real. Sophia nodded. And we start by tracking down Victoria Ashford. As if summoned by her name, Eloise's assistant knocked on the door. Ms. Thompson? There's a Victoria Ashford here to see you. She says it's urgent. Eloise looked at her family. Well, that's convenient. Should I send her away? Her assistant asked. No, Eloise said, straightening her shoulders. Send her in. It's time for some answers. As Victoria Ashford walked into the office, beautiful, poised, and wearing a smile that didn't reach her eyes, Eloise realized that the fight for Clark's trust was about to begin in earnest. Eloise, Victoria said sweetly, I came as soon as I heard about the article. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Are you? Eloise asked, studying Victoria's face. Of course. I know how much Clark means to you. Do you? Because I'm starting to think you know a lot more than you've let on. Victoria's smile faltered slightly, and Eloise knew she was right. The question was, could she prove it before Clark was lost to her forever? Outside, the reporters continued to gather, and somewhere across town, Clark was facing his own crisis. But in that moment, surrounded by her family and facing down the woman who might have destroyed her happiness, Eloise Thompson made a decision. She was going to fight. For her reputation, for her integrity, and most importantly, for the love of her life. Even if he didn't believe in her anymore, she still believed in them. Victoria Ashford glided into Eloise's office like she owned the place, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. She was everything Eloise had imagined: tall, blonde, perfectly polished, and radiating the kind of confidence that came from never having to work for anything. "Victoria," Eloise said evenly, "how thoughtful of you to stop by on such a difficult day." "Well, I couldn't just sit by and watch while the media tore you apart," Victoria replied with mock concern. "Especially when I feel partially responsible." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Responsible how?" Victoria's smile became predatory. "I may have mentioned to a journalist friend that I found the timing of your relationship interesting. Pure coincidence, of course." "Of course," Eloise's father said dryly. "Just like it was pure coincidence that you called my daughter last week asking questions about Clark." Victoria's composure slipped slightly. "I'm not sure what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything," Robert said, standing up to his full height. "I'm stating that you deliberately sabotaged my daughter's relationship and business reputation." "That's a serious accusation," Victoria said, but her voice wavered. "It's about to get more serious," Sophia announced, holding up her phone. "Because I've been recording this conversation." Victoria's face went pale. "You can't do that." "Actually, New York is a one-party consent state," Eloise said sweetly. "Sophia can record anyone she wants as long as she's part of the conversation. And she just admitted to feeding information to journalists," Linda added cheerfully. "How convenient." Victoria realized she'd been trapped. "You have no proof of anything illegal." "No," came a familiar voice from the doorway, "but we have proof of something else." Everyone turned to see Clark standing in the entrance, flanked by Marcus, Uncle William, and a woman in a severe business suit. "Clark," Eloise breathed, her heart leaping despite everything. "This is Special Agent Jennifer Martinez from the SEC," Clark said, nodding toward the woman. "She's been investigating the anonymous tip about our relationship." Agent Martinez stepped forward. "Ms. Ashford, we'd like to ask you some questions about your communications with Business Weekly reporter David Chen." Victoria's eyes darted toward the door, but Marcus was blocking her exit. "You see," Agent Martinez continued, "when we investigated the source of the article, we discovered that the anonymous tip came from a burner phone registered to a fake company, a company that was incorporated using your social security number." "That's impossible," Victoria said weakly. "The same phone also made several calls to private investigators over the past month," Clark added, his voice cold. "Investigators who were hired to follow Eloise and me." Eloise stared at Victoria in shock. "You had us followed?" Victoria looked trapped. "I just wanted to know if Clark was happy." "By hiring private investigators and leaking false information to the press?" Uncle William's voice was incredulous. Agent Martinez pulled out a file. "Ms. Ashford, we also have records showing that you attempted to purchase shares in both Thompson Steel and Armstrong Financial Holdings immediately before the article was published. That suggests you were planning to profit from the market volatility your leak would create." "That's insider trading," Marcus said helpfully. "Also securities fraud." Victoria's perfect composure finally cracked completely. "He was supposed to be mine," she burst out, pointing at Clark. "We were engaged. I made one mistake and he threw away everything we had." "One mistake?" Clark's voice was dangerously quiet. "Victoria, you told your sister you could put up with anyone for $2 billion. I was nervous. It was wedding day jitters. You also cleaned out our joint account and tried to sell the engagement ring before you disappeared," Clark continued. "That's not jitters, that's theft. I gave the money back after your lawyer told you that you could be prosecuted for embezzlement." Eloise watched this exchange with growing understanding. "You never loved him at all, did you?" Victoria whirled on her. "And you do? You who recognized him from a magazine and decided to target him at some coffee shop?" "That's not what happened," Eloise said firmly. "Isn't it? You saw his picture, you got a job in his neighborhood, and you waited for him to show up." "Actually," came another voice from the doorway, "that's not what happened at all." Everyone turned to see an elderly man with kind eyes and a warm smile entering the office. "Grandpa Joe?" Eloise gasped. "What are you doing here?" "Your friend Sophia called me," Joe Thompson said, walking slowly into the room with the aid of a cane. "She thought I might be able to clear up some confusion about when you started working at the coffee shop." "Mr. Thompson," Agent Martinez said respectfully, "I thought you were deceased." "Common misconception," Joe said with a twinkle in his eye. "I retired and let everyone think I died so they'd stop bothering me about business. Best decision I ever made." Clark stared at the man. "You're Joseph Thompson. You built Thompson Steel." "Guilty as charged," Joe said cheerfully. "And you must be the young man who's stolen my granddaughter's heart." "Grandpa," Eloise said weakly, "this isn't the best time." "Actually, it's the perfect time," Joe interrupted, "because I can settle this whole mess right now." He pulled out a thick folder. "These are employment records from Murphy's coffee shop dating back 2 years. Agent Martinez took the folder and examined it. "According to these records, Ms. Thompson started working at the coffee shop 24 months ago." "That's impossible," Victoria said. "The Armstrong deal only started 3 months ago." "Exactly," Joe said with satisfaction. "Which means Eloise was working there long before anyone knew about any business deals." Clark looked at the employment records, then at Eloise. "You've been working there for 2 years?" "I started during my MBA program," Eloise said quietly. "I wanted to understand customer service and small business operations from the ground up. She's been bringing me coffee and stories about her customers every Sunday for 2 years," Joe continued, "including stories about a mysterious businessman who came in every morning and was always polite to everyone, even when the coffee was terrible." "You talked about me?" Clark asked Eloise. "Every week," Joe confirmed. "She called you the gentleman in the blue suits because you always wore blue." Sophia grinned. "She had a crush on you for months before she even knew your name." "That's also impossible," Victoria snapped. "She recognized him from his picture." "Oh, she did," Joe agreed. "But not until after she'd already been talking about him for 6 months." Agent Martinez looked up from the records. "These documents appear to be authentic, Ms. Thompson. When exactly did you first learn Mr. Armstrong's identity?" Eloise took a deep breath. "The week before he introduced himself to me. My uncle showed me his picture as part of a business presentation." "And what did you do with that information?" "I panicked," Eloise admitted. "I'd been talking about this customer for months, wondering who he was, if he was single, if he'd ever ask me out. Then suddenly I knew he was this powerful CEO and I didn't know what to do." Clark stepped closer to her. "So when I finally introduced myself, I already knew your name. And I didn't tell you because I was terrified you'd think I'd been stalking you or planning something. Which is exactly what I thought when I found out." "I know. And I don't blame you." Agent Martinez closed the folder. "Based on these employment records and the timeline they establish, there's no evidence of any impropriety in Ms. Thompson's actions. The SEC investigation is closed." She turned to Victoria. "However, Ms. Ashford, you'll need to come with us to answer questions about securities fraud and market manipulation." "This is ridiculous," Victoria protested as Agent Martinez took her arm. "I was protecting Clark from a gold digger." "Victoria," Clark said quietly, "Eloise doesn't need my money. She has more than enough of her own. But she's not right for you. She's too ordinary." "That's exactly why she's perfect for me," Clark said, looking directly at Eloise. "She makes me want to be ordinary too." As Agent Martinez led Victoria away, still protesting her innocence, the office fell silent. Finally, Joe clapped his hands together. "Well, that was entertaining. Now I believe you two have some talking to do." "Grandpa," Eloise started. "No arguments. Everyone out. This old man wants to see his granddaughter happy, and that's not going to happen with an audience." Uncle William, Marcus, Robert, Linda, and Sophia all filed out, with Sophia pausing to whisper, "Don't screw this up," to both Clark and Eloise. Joe was the last to leave. "Clark," he said, pausing at the door, "my granddaughter has been in love with you since before she knew your name. The question is, Are you smart enough to be in love with her back? After everyone left, Clark and Eloise stood alone in her office, surrounded by the chaos of the day, but finally able to focus on each other. "I'm sorry," they said simultaneously. "You first," Clark said. "I should have told you the moment I realized who you were," Eloise said. "I should have trusted you with the truth instead of protecting what I thought was a perfect beginning." "And I should have trusted you when you tried to explain," Clark replied. "I should have listened instead of assuming the worst." "You had every reason to assume the worst. Victoria really did a number on you." "That's not an excuse. You're not Victoria. You never were." Clark stepped closer. "Eloise, I've spent the last 6 hours thinking I'd lost the best thing that ever happened to me. You didn't lose me. I'm right here. Are you? Because I said some terrible things, and I kept some important secrets. We both made mistakes." Clark reached for her hands. "So where does that leave us?" "Well," Eloise said, attempting a smile, "we could start over, again." "How many times are we going to start over?" "As many times as it takes to get it right." Clark pulled her closer. "What if I told you I don't want to start over? What if I told you I want to keep going exactly where we are, mistakes and all?" "I'd say that sounds perfect. Even though we're about to be business partners, which will probably be complicated. Especially because of that. And even though your grandfather apparently knows everything about our relationship before we do. He's very thorough. And even though the entire city of New York just read about our private business in a magazine." "Well," Eloise said, standing on her tiptoes to get closer to his face, "now they know we're taken." Clark laughed. "Is that what we are? Taken?" "Completely. Utterly. Ridiculously taken." "Good," Clark said, leaning down to kiss her. "Because I have something to ask you." "What?" Instead of answering, Clark dropped to one knee and pulled out a small velvet box. Eloise gasped. "Clark, what are you doing?" "Something I've been planning for weeks before all this craziness started." He opened the box to reveal a stunning vintage ring. "Eloise Thompson, you make terrible coffee, you argue with customers, you hide your true identity, and you've completely turned my world upside down." "That's not very romantic," Eloise said, laughing through tears. "I'm not finished. You also make me laugh every day, challenge me to be better, and love me for who I am, not what I have. You're brilliant, beautiful, stubborn, and completely impossible. Getting better. And I can't imagine spending another day without you. Will you marry me?" The office was silent except for the sounds of the city far below. "Yes," Eloise whispered. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Clark slipped the ring onto her finger and stood up to kiss her properly, lifting her off her feet and spinning her around. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I love you too, even if you are ridiculously dramatic," says the woman who works at a coffee shop for fun, says the man who hired a mariachi band for a street serenade. They were interrupted by applause from outside the office. Through the glass walls, they could see their entire family and friend group watching and cheering. Sophia held up a sign that read, "Finally." "How long have they been standing there?" Eloise asked. "Probably the whole time," Clark said. "Your family is not subtle. Neither is yours, apparently." They looked at each other and burst out laughing. "So," Clark said, "ready to plan a wedding? Are you going to hire an entire orchestra for the ceremony?" "I was thinking more like a full symphony." "Perfect. I'll book the Metropolitan Opera House." "I love you, Eloise Thompson. I love you too, Clark Armstrong, forever and always." As their family and friends poured back into the office to celebrate, as the reporters outside finally got a real story to write about, and as the sun set over Manhattan, Clark and Eloise realized that sometimes the most complicated love stories have the most perfect endings. 6 months later, they were married in a beautiful ceremony at the Thompson family estate in Chicago. The coffee shop where they met catered the reception, at Eloise's insistence. There was indeed a full orchestra, at Clark's insistence, and Sophia's maid of honor speech included a detailed timeline of every ridiculous thing Clark had done to win Eloise's heart. Joe Thompson walked his granddaughter down the aisle, whispering, I always knew he was the one, even before you did." Uncle William officiated the ceremony. Marcus served as best man, and even Robert Thompson admitted that Clark wasn't entirely terrible for a Yankees fan. As for Victoria Ashford, she was convicted of securities fraud and sentenced to community service. She now works at a soup kitchen where she's learning that not everything in life can be bought. And Clark and Eloise? They lived happily, chaotically, ridiculously ever after, running their respective companies, arguing about business decisions, and making terrible coffee together every Sunday morning. Because sometimes, the best love stories are the ones that start with the worst coffee and end with the perfect partnership. The end.